Welcome to the BPM360 Podcast. I'm Russell.
And I'm Caspar. And together we will help you navigate the treacherous waters of the BPM adoption journey. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the BPM360 Podcast. My name is Caspar. I'm your host. And as always, I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, Russell. Russell, where does this podcast find you today?
Finds me back at home in Hattingen. It's an beautiful autumn day today in where I live. So it's a really great day. Friday is always good. So I hope you, Caspar, managed to get back home from the Cellosphere all in one piece.
I did, with a little bit of a delay thanks to Deutsche Bahn, but let's not talk about that. I would just want to know, how are the moles in your garden doing?
Don't talk about them. I've avoided the garden. Yeah, there's a lot of leaves on there, but it's a total ruin. My garden is a ruin. I'm not going to go in there until spring, and then I've already thought about some strategies how to get rid of the moles. I'll see.
All right. Well, leave the whack-a-mole for what it is. But we have a guest, Russell. We have a guest, and we're very happy with our guest today. Will you introduce him, or will I, or will just let him introduce himself?
But this interesting point, because most of the guests we've had, one of us or both of us have known these guests in the past. So This is the first time we have somebody, for us both, a complete stranger. And so we're really happy. And I was looking into the profile, so I'm really, really stoked to have James Davies on the show today. And I think the best thing is, because we both don't know him so much, that we hand over to James. James, welcome. Yes. And
good to be
please give us and the audience some insights to your person, what you do, your background, and as we always ask our guests, how the hell did you finish up in process management or in a process management related topic? So what's your story? Welcome to the show, James, and the floor is yours.
It's excellent to be here, guys. I love geeking out on this stuff. So I'm James Davies, and I'm the CEO of a company called Kinetic Data. We're based in the Twin Cities in the U.S., and I've been with the company for about 11 years now. Kind of an interesting story how I got here. When I was 14 or 15 years old, one of my first jobs was working on a help desk, and it was for our local telephone company. And I would, answer calls, triaging at that point, DSL or dial-up issues. And I really got my first flavor for what it was like to serve customers and the processes around that and how to make them happy and have empathy for them, because they were just, they were frustrated with me and because they had a problem, right? And they needed to get it solved. So my whole kind of career started out then. I was still in high school and working in that. And after finishing up high school and going to college, one of my first jobs out of school was with the State Department, actually, here in the U.S. And I worked for a systems integrator who was helping to run their actual ticketing system there at the State Department. And the State Department had purchased Kinetic Data. And I was the lucky consultant that got to go ahead and implement it within the State Department. And as you can imagine, the State Department has many complicated processes. Many of them are paper-based. Yeah. And so, like every other organization, they were trying to do digital transformation and digitize some of their processes. And they brought in Kinetic to help out with that. And we had a great run there, and was able to streamline a number of different processes, typically human-in-the-loop style processes. And I fell in love with Kinetic. As a vendor at that point. About a year or two later, the project was finished and quite successful. I decided to leave and move from the Washington, D.C. area to the Baltimore area because I had gotten engaged and, well, frankly, housing prices were too expensive in the D.C. area. So I left, and about 2 weeks later, I got a call from this Minnesota company, Kinetic Data, who I was familiar with because I worked with them. And they said, hey, we need someone out on the East Coast. We do a lot of business with the federal government. Can you help, do implementations of Kinetic and come and work for us? So I gladly took the job. And it's been a roller coaster ever since then. So I've been in many different roles at the company. So I started off again as a consultant, kind of helping our customers implement our software. And these are all process problems. So it got to dig in deep and then leverage our technology to help solve those problems. I got into sales engineering. So that was, kind of doing demos for customers with our sales team. And that was a lot of fun. Soon after, I was asked to be the product manager at Kinetic and really get voice of customer into the product, try to improve our builders' experiences. So I did that for a number of years, led our engineering team. And then finally, I was asked to become the COO and kind of apply those agile principles that we applied to into the engineering team to the rest of the company. And then finally, last year, the founder decided to take a step back after working on the company for a really long time. And he was ready for a break, and he became the chairman of the board and asked me to be the CEO. So that brings us to today.
Wow.
Thanks.
Well, that's quite a journey.
Yeah, and I have a question about one of the things you mentioned in your introduction, and I think we need to clarify something. We all know what dial-ups and DSL lines are, but I think part of our audience never ever experienced that.
Yeah,
that was back in the day when you actually connected a landline from the phone to a modem, and then based on the sound the modem made, you could tell if the connection was going to be built up, yes or no. People who know, and other people who don't know, you missed out on something. But that was the question I have. You mentioned, James, the Twin Cities. Help me out. I'm quite familiar with U.S. topography and geography, but what are the Twin Cities?
So it's in Minnesota. There's two cities that are kind of sister cities next to each other, St. Paul and Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, those two. Okay.
That's nicknamed the Twin Cities. So we actually we started in St. Paul, and then we moved during COVID time to Minneapolis. And it's basically a 20-minute move.
Cool. All right. No, that's good. Just to clarify it up for the people that are not that familiar with the way that we have names for cities in the US. Cool. My first question, James, would be Kinetic Data. Could you describe for the listeners what it is that you do? I mean, I've taken a look on I browsed your website, so I have a good idea of what I think it is, but I would love to hear it from the man himself.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we help organizations streamline human-centric workflows, and so it's a subset of the world of BPM. I can give a little bit of background about how we started.
Yes, please.
The founder of our company came out of the 3M organization, and he was one of the first BMC remedy developers. If you guys are familiar with BMC,
I worked with it. Yeah.
And so he did that for 3M, and then partnered with BMC, started his own consulting company to help organizations that had big implementations of BMC, and he'd travel around the world and help them fix their database issues, et cetera, et cetera. And he started to see these common problems. And really one of those problems was they were customizing this framework or this platform to the nth degree. And at the end of the day, they were customizing it in order to improve their end user customer facing business process problems. And he decided to come up with a product that basically could sit in front of or on top of this BMC platform and decouple the user experience and business workflows from these underlying core systems. In this case, it was BMC Remedy. That's in the way in the past. And so we built our first product to basically be a service catalog, a way for users to be able to come in and say, here's the different things that I can ask for. And then a workflow engine that would route things to the right group inside of BMC Remedy. It was quite simple back in the day. And BMC didn't have a product that competed with that. And so any BMC customer needed software like ours. And that was the genesis and kind of made the business take off. But there were some key principles that we adhered to along the journey. And one of those was freedom to change. He saw that people were scared to make changes. Once they got their business processes in place, it was risky to make changes to them. And so he wanted to architect it in a way where you could get, I'll say version A out there or version 1 out there. And then a couple of weeks later, version 2, version 3, version 4. And he wanted to architect a system in a way that allowed you to have that flexibility and really reduce the fear of change. So as the company kind of evolved, our customers started saying, well, we don't want to just do this with BMC. What if we could do this in front of our HR systems and our ERP systems? And so we genericized the platform so it didn't really rely on this one, BMC product, and came out with the Kinetic platform, which is an agnostic business process management tool that allows you to define really excellent user experiences for either your customers or your employees. We have a forms engine that allows you to capture data from end users wherever they are, a workflow engine that's agnostic to the back end and decoupled from the data behind the scenes, and then a really fantastic integration and open integration engine. And we've kind of philosophically focused on those core building blocks because we think that those are essential for building whatever you need to build, whatever business process you need. And we kind of went away from, or decided intentionally to say, like, we're not going to add 10 million features to our product. We're going to keep it simple. And if customers actually need those features, they can build them with those building blocks. And that's been really successful, refreshing for our customers. We're kind of like a back to the basics kind of company. And we've done really well with that. And and so that's the space we're in. So we help organizations typically provide user experiences either to their customers or to their employees or to their vendors. And so think of that as a portal. And then inside of that portal, there's defined processes that you kick off, and there's different participants along the way. There's different systems involved along the way. And in doing that, you now have this plug and play modular architecture where if, let's say, your IT system or your HR system, you want to change it because it got too expensive, or there's a better one, or AI helped you create a better one, you can unplug that one piece and then plug something else in, and your entire business process doesn't evaporate because you switch software vendors. So we really like to enable our customers to have agility.
So ultimately, it is like an orchestration layer that you more or less can now put above like a whole subset of applications. And focusing more, not so much purely on the data, but also from the human interaction, that you have like an orchestration, you have one common like user interface over which then these underlying services or applications can be addressed at. Is there any, I mean, looking at, say, what would you say are typically I could imagine that you're in a bit of a sandwich position from a competition, that each of the applications is trying to grow more. We were talking in the last episode about platform economy and the way the big applications are trying to reach out in direction of, say, the user experience to try to take away a bit of that reason for existence and bringing up competition there, but also trying to expand their ecosystem of functionalities in a direction that the orchestration is also covered a lot. So how do you see this in what are the key success factors of Kinetic Data in this, let's say, moving market, but also like everybody's trying to claim more of the cake? Development, and what do you think is the key differentiator that marks your business?
Oh, it's an excellent question. So over the last decade and a half, I've seen organizations, big organizations. So we focus typically on Fortune 2000 and above, and then big government. So we're typically not dealing with SMBs, but we've seen this big shift from a ton of purpose-built applications, Java or C# applications, there's 200 of them, so the pendulum's kind of swung to consolidation into these big platforms. Yeah. And we've been kind of watching that from afar happen, and we see a lot of risk in kind of taking a bunch of different applications, or I'll say functions, business processes or functions, and consolidating them into one platform. On one side, it feels like that's the right decision because you've got one vendor to choke, I'll say. But on the other side, now your vendor is in control of your destiny. And so as that's happened, organizations that did consolidate onto, I'll say, one platform, there's some, I call them mega-SaaS platforms that can kind of do it all. You're now trapped into their user experience. You're now being trapped into their AI, and the prices keep going up. And I think organizations, they're now waking up and really questioning the return on investment into those. So what we philosophically believe in a best of breed ecosystem. If there's this HR problem,
that's great. Now I jumped into that one because I grew up in an IT company that was always struggling on a manufacturing execution system and planning level, detailed planning level for specifically for pharmaceutical and steel industries. And there was always the discussion around best of breed versus the SAP takes it all in industry terms. Yeah. And I think the battle is ongoing, but it's a very interesting topic you're bringing up, that is that pendulum that I think in the industry in Germany was ERP was taking up more and more space.
Yep.
There used to be CRM elements of pharmaceuticals that were always, that SAP didn't, the ERP vendor didn't manage to touch into. But maybe there is now a time when with the capabilities of tools and AI to orchestrate these more, that there's this what you call it, monopoly on the functionality and application platform. It's swinging back a bit. And that's where tools like this can certainly help. But when just talking about, just dig into a bit of the maybe technology wise. So how over the years have you adopted to like standards that have been like, well, let's say kind of like buzzwords in the market around BPMN, low code, no code. What is your take on that? Because what I understand is the history of your company started before that, the journey. And how have you been able to, in the context of your customers and clients and philosophy, had to adapt? Did you adapt or did you offer services because you had to, because the market expected it? Or is it something where you said there's real value behind that, and we've been, we have this also enclosed in our engine or in our framework? So how has that evolved over the time, and what's your take on these trends that you see on the market?
We've been watching the market obviously intensely for the last 25 plus years. And we've seen these frameworks or these protocols kind of come and go. What we tried to focus on is, what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve as an organization? And then, so what are the outcomes? And if we can get to the same outcomes by having an open architecture that allows you to pivot, I'll say, off of us or off of another tool to us, well, at the end of the day, we've just decided to not buy into those frameworks. And if our customers really want, I'll say, BPMN notation or whatever, then there's platforms out there that do that. But if what they're really trying to do is streamline their business processes, and if what they're really trying to do is provide better user experiences to their customers and employees, there's a way to do that without the rigidity of those frameworks or protocols. And so we just decided to keep our platform kind of agnostic to all of that, but follow standards. I'll say, when we export a workflow from Kinetic, it exports as a JSON document that you can go and do anything with. You can migrate it to another system, et cetera. And so we kept it open so that we're easy to integrate with, and we're easy to integrate from Kinetic to another tool. And so, yeah, we've kind of been able to be agnostic and on the sides, and then play in all types of different spaces, whether it's, sales ops processes, HR processes, IT processes. And it's been good for us, and our customers kind of love our approach. I think so.
So when you're saying, Caspar, you definitely have a question. I don't want to ask. I don't want to grill James too much here. You can.
No. We need to give him a breather now. But let me ask you then this, James. The effectiveness of any overlaying tool that you put on top of let's say the system of records, because that's ultimately what you're doing, is depending obviously on the quality of the data in those systems, right? I mean, you don't do anything to change the data quality in your platform. You're basically just getting the right data, presenting that in a user-friendly way so they can do what they need to do, and then bring it back in.
Yep.
What is your... Is that based primarily then on APIs that you communicate with the system? Right. Okay, good.
Yeah, and so what we basically do is, so it's not just one system that we can talk to. It's 30 or 50 different systems. And so when a user logs in, the end goal for many of our customers is to be able to provide an enterprise portal for their employees to log in, so they don't have to log into the HR portal, the IT portal, the finance portal. They can go to one spot. And they can provide a really good experience for the jobs to be done. And so if you abstract that user experience, you can stop thinking about how the systems work and start to think about how the end users actually want to get something done. So you can create an intuitive experience, and then you're effectively just mapping it via integrations to these backend tools.
Yeah.
And if the quality of the data in those backend tools, maybe it sometimes isn't great, well, we can expose that data. Like, let's just say it's the user's record. And that user record exists in multiple systems. We can expose that inside of the portal, and they can say, hey, I want to make a change to this, and then send it through maybe an approval process for their manager to approve. And then we can write that data back and actually clean up the data as we're going. So that's something we actually did for the Army a couple of years back. In the U.S. Army, they had a data problem, I'll say, and they got many different systems, and it was the user's like home address or phone number that they could never get right, and no one had the accurate information. So we just put it in front of the user, said, update your phone number, and then we updated it in 10 different systems behind the scenes.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. Mm-hmm. At the moment that you because what you're basically trying to do, I guess, is say, listen, I'm going to put this overlay on top of maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more systems for within an organization, so that the end users actually have a uniform user interface and they have to go to one place. At a moment that you would, let's theoretically say, at the moment that you would cover all applications in an organization, what you've basically created is just another massive application, which also presents some sort of lock-in, I would say.
Sure.
Because at the moment that they would step away from it, the only thing that they have left is all of the individual user interfaces and user experiences of the underlying systems, right? Not saying that that's right or wrong, but I'm just trying to get a feel for that.
A lot. I think I've got a good answer. We try to be the anti-vendor lock vendor, and so some of our architecture actually makes it so that you can get out of using Kinetic if for whatever reason you want to walk away from us. So one of those points is from the portal perspective, our customers can build those portals using React or Angular or front-end frameworks. So they actually own that code. We don't. All of that is the customers. Any web forms or workflows or data that exists in our platform can be sucked out via our API or an export tool, and then transformed and put into another tool. So our customers typically don't leave us because they see us as this way to keep the rest of the vendors in their environment in check by letting, it's really the end users that we're having use Kinetic. Power users are still using the HR tool or the IT tool or the ERP tool. It's the end users, the occasional users, the approvers. And what that allows us to do is really reduce licensing counts of all across these systems. So, because if you're paying for, I'll say, an approver in the IT system at $1,000 a year, and they go in once or never, you're still paying for them. Well, what if we can shift that up to the user experience layer, and then once it's approved, write it down. And so those are the reasons our customers stick with us. It's flexible and it reduces their costs quite a bit. And then it also makes it whoever owns the glass, meaning the user experience, is wins. So we try to enable the customer to own that layer, and then because that's the stickiest part of the application. If you have to rip an application out and retrain 10,000 users, if that's how big your organization is, it's risky.
I can imagine that one. But then I also guess that the customers must be happy with that. I can't imagine the underlying system of records being overly happy about that. Did you run into that?
Yeah,
because at the moment that you say we can do this, and I totally understand, and I even agree with the use case where you say I have an occasional user. Why would you spend a shitload of money on having a specific license if you can also do it with, let's say, a user on an overlaying platform? The only question is, how does that work from an authorization perspective? Because at the moment that you would have a user in your system, in this case, perform, let's say, an approval of a purchase requisition, let's make it very specifically, that still needs to happen in the backend system with a user that has sufficient authorizations for that, right?
Yeah,
how would you deal with that?
We'll typically have either the customer will change and let us be the system of record for just approvals, and then that work from their workflow of the backend system, or we'll write that approval record via an API down to that system of record. So the whole point of our platform isn't to reduce the licensing count of these users.
I get that.
To be able to do that in certain situations where there's just common things where managers need to go in and approve something once in a while, and if we can do that at the separate layer, but it's easy and intuitive. You guys know what it's like to navigate in the system. It's like
what I like about the discussion as well is that you always fall into this when these, let's say, the initial idea of, let's say, orchestration and user interface. For example, I saw this also around SAP plant maintenance. There's a lot of tools out there that say, come on, if you're on site and you have to log into an SAP client, that's not going to work, especially in the R3 days. I mean, now with Fury apps, it's getting a bit better. but there's a lot of vendors out there that really are just like the user interface that you can have on a mobile device, and it gives you quick access to the spare parts or whatever tasks they have to do. So complete mobile, a lot of mobile solutions are all based on actually having the systems of record, the key capabilities in the application, just providing a better user interface. So I really get that, and whoever owns that is really under control. But what does happen a lot with, and I can imagine, especially when you're orchestrating across a lot of applications, that this layer, which is orchestrating, gets like, it becomes its own application. Gets its own data records. We need to include a database to manage all the approvals because we're not doing it, in that system X or Y anymore. And then at a certain time, it can evolve into a bit of a monster that then is in itself, that it carries the burden of, what you wanted to have, a nice, lean, flexible, good user interface application. And then the framework starts growing and growing and turns into a bit of a monster itself. You see that with a lot of lean applications around ServiceNow and Jira. You look at them afterwards and said, wow, whatever started as a lean journey of just doing a bit of task management, it's turned out to a full-fledged application where you're saying, is that still the right way to go forward? So if you encounter this, like this progress, and is there things where you say, we have to kind of like decouple it, or maybe set up an own application just to keep the framework lean? Or is it something where it says it's a matter of management more than the framework? That
I think it's a mix of both. You can create a monster in any application. There's, every application has its limits, and there's best practices for it. What we decided to do, unlike the Jiras and the ServiceNows, is in those systems, they have a base record that gets extended to create all these other apps. So there's a task record, for instance, and then that task record can be used to represent an incident or a change or a problem, et cetera, et cetera. That means that as you're building these applications out that are all reliant on this underlying record that got extended, if you ever need to make a change to that underlying record, all of a sudden, like, the coordination is crazy. So what we decided to do is basically make it so that each and every process stands on its own, and it's basically isolated so that you can work on one process. So one workflow, I'll say, at a time. And if you break something in that workflow, it only breaks that workflow. It's not going to break 13 other things. And so it's just in the way that we organize the data within the platform, we made it so that, again, to reduce the fear of change, we wanted to make it so it's, you're not going into one form that's got 300 fields that are conditionally hiding and showing, and, like these other monster systems do. But you can have very specific records for very specific things, and those things will trigger workflows in a very simple operation. That makes it easier for a user too. So a good example of this is, and similar to what you mentioned before, a big school district here in the U.S. It's one of the largest school districts in the U.S. During COVID, they had to distribute 200,000 laptops. And in order to do that, and they have to keep track of this stuff because grant money is being used to process it. In order to do that, they would have their field service people would have to log into their ERP, these 18 clicks for every single laptop. And it was too much. They built this mini process. It was almost a temporary process with a quick web form with, serial number, name of student, and did some lookups to different systems, submit. And we went and did all the crazy background stuff to log the asset and upload the signature form that the parent said, hey, we're responsible for this. And it saved them a ton of time. And that's one mini process in a collection of many, many processes. But if you ever break something in that, it's not going to break anything else. So we tried to architect a system around that.
So are you a solution provider, or are you a software like vendor? So do you do with your company the consulting around the processes and the implementation as well? Or is the platform more that you say it's something the customers, they configure themselves? So that you're more on the side of advising them how to set up, configure, implement the system and roll it out themselves. So just for a bit of a feeling on how the ecosystem is and how maybe even complex it is. It is a specialist job to extend, because you're saying they should lose the fear to change, but how do they keep control of what has been changed? So what is your go-to, say, the monitoring of the task or the workflows you're going to use, like a process mining, task mining aspect? and what tools do you have to explain and visualize what's actually happening under the hood, especially when it gets more on a corporate level, a bit more complex? What is your take there?
Well, to answer your first question, so we started out as a consulting company that built some products. And so there's many software companies that start that way. And so we were kind of, for a number of years, a consulting company that happened to have a product. And over the last couple of years, we've really changed to grow into a true software company. And now we have an ecosystem of partners that are, that really know HR, or really know a specific, the energy industry. Okay. And they do the implementations for us. And so we just try to provide the best technology in a generic way that can help out, any customer. And so we lived through those process problems. We lived through how hard it is to change a workflow that's in flight and has, 10,000 things running through it. And so we built a system that makes it so like, hey, you can have a new version, and the things that were, previously going through that workflow can continue through that workflow. But at the same time, we understand compliance is a need. So every time my workflow gets, updated or a change gets made to one of our models, we're recording that in the database, making it visible to our customers. And even we have the ability to send all of that, the change data, what changed and why, out to their centralized, logging platforms that are aggregating that and displaying it, from a change management perspective. So we made it so that anything that changes in the platform, when it changes, it can initiate its own workflow. So for instance, if I update a workflow, that can trigger another workflow that says, now go write this as a change request in your change management system. So it's like, again, it's like kind of first principles thinking. If we can give you these hooks and these basic things, you can really build whatever you need. And if you don't need all of that stuff, well, then great. You don't need to have a complicated system.
And that's a good point, because I was just looking into some really cool agentic applications now, platforms, and there also you have like this orchestrating agent that then has like a subset of specialized agents that he's like coordinating, and he's triggering them. So actually they're communicating with each other. But similarly, you also have like your workflows then under certain conditions will trigger other workflows. So technically hard coded, you had that also with the webhooks or APIs that you could then trigger then sub workflows if a specific approval is required or a specific kind of like whatever archiving is required. You can, but you have to, the logics or the heuristics over which you then guide through the workflows to trigger something, it's more hard coded. So how do you see a shift now that this is becoming more autonomous under the aspects of AI, and how is AI influencing your platform and the way such an overlaying orchestration is now being implemented and used to customers? And
so it's been a neat journey to watch, because our customers are now using AI tools within our workflow platform. So again, we built this framework of portals, forms, workflows, and integrations. And so our integration framework can integrate with anything, including AI tools. And so what we're starting to see is customers, instead of doing like a manual approval, they'll create a step that's calling an AI agent that's trained on, hey, given this criteria, should this be approved or not? And it's an approval agent. And if it comes back with a, hey, 98% 98% confidence that you can auto approve this, it auto approves it. And they're just changing steps in a workflow. Where I see this going is that the organizations will still need defined business processes, and then agents can participate within that process. And that's so we can orchestrate those agents. There can be agent orchestrators as well that we're calling into, but they have specific business logic that needs to happen with 100% confidence, no hallucination, et cetera. And so we have AI agents that are triggering workflows in our platform, or AI triggering workflows in our platform, and then participating in workflows within our platform. And I see that's kind of where it goes now. Our product roadmap, what we're working on next is how do we make it even easier for AI to call into our platform, and more native for us to call into these AI tools, using model context protocol, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have to get into the technical weeds, but our customers are doing it today, and we just want to make it even easier and easier, because AI is not going away. On the AI topic, another thing that I like to bring up is, just like we are big believers in decoupling the user experience from your systems of record so that you can change your systems of record. but I'll finish my thought. We also believe that you should have specific AI vendors and not be combining all of this stuff together into one big platform. And so there's a particular CRM vendor and a particular ITSM vendor out there that are going all in on AI, and I think it's.
I've heard of a CRM vendor that is going all in on that.
Because AI is going to be so important, and because of the pace of change, again, back to best of breed. I think we encourage our customers to choose AI tools that they can change out quite easily as it evolves and as pricing changes, et cetera, versus kind of going all in. And so our framework enables that as well.
Okay, just to rephrase that, because I think that's a super interesting point. So what you're saying is, just as like you were like an orchestrating human interface layer decoupled from the system of records, also in the direction of AI platforms, you're also propagating, hey, do not just don't look at each system of records that is now building in singular AI capabilities on the system of record level, but think about it more on a, let's say, strategic level of you're orchestrating your overarching processes. You have your, let's say, unified user interface to manage also the interaction on the human level, and think about having like a dedicated strategy and platform for AI that you then can feed in over your Kinetic Data layer. And exactly. Then you have more control over it. And I do like that, because I've been bombarded with if I go into Google, or if I go into Word, or if I go into GitHub, or if I go into Aris, each one says AI functionality, even mirror boards. Actually, they're quite cool in mirror boards. Yeah. So everywhere you go, but if for the one-off usage in the context of this application, it's all fine. Yeah.
Agreed. I was about to say,
from a process perspective, if you want a governance on, and you don't want them to hallucinate, but you want to really use them in a context of your business process, you do not have control in them layers, and you don't have the capability, you don't have the possibility to configure it, to change it, whatever. It's not thought of that. It's like a capsuled function, AI function embedded. And I'm completely with you. I do like that idea, and that's where more and more the overarching orchestration is important, because I mean, you see it now with SAP. It is a big platform. Mm-hmm. Bringing in Joule is super complex, but what you're bought in. It's like, right. If you want to, you don't really have so much influence on adapting and using it in the context of your business process. It's been driven by the way SAP wants you to use it in the context of you using their software.
Who do you want to be in control of your destiny and your AI strategy? Exactly. Is it you or your vendor?
Yeah.
And so
you want to be in control of your AI. Yeah. I'm totally with you.
There's another layer that we didn't really talk about. We don't need to spend too much time there. But so there's this user experience, the layer, right? That we want the customer to own that. There's a workflow layer. There's going to be a vendor involved there, hopefully Kinetic Data. But you want to be able to suck out your workflows and ingest them into other things. So you want whatever you choose there, you want it to be open. Then you have a system of record layer. And then below that, you need an enterprise reporting layer of some sort, so you can get a holistic view of your business. So these systems of record are, putting their data into a data layer. Then you have an AI layer that I don't know if you can see my hands or if it's too small, but I think of it as a pyramid. So user experience, workflow, systems of record, reporting, and then over on the side across all of that is kind of your AI layer that's interacting with all points there, so that your AI tools have a holistic view of your business. So when you're asking a business strategy question, it's not just looking at one subset of data.
I mean, we've seen companies. I work for a big pharmaceutical company, and they also have their AI layer. Yeah, so clearly they are going, and they have. And why? It was driven by the data, and the data architects are also, of course, looking at a dedicated data layer, like with Snowflake and stuff like that. They also look at independently from their classical system of records. Because they see that they have their ServiceNows, they have their research development department, ERPs, they have their CRMs, and they want to have data analytics and AI, let's say, machine learning kind of algorithms. It's not just Gen AI they do. They want to have it over all their data, and that's why they need to have an own independent like data architecture and an own independent AI architecture. And that does play to a certain extent also into your game, I would say. Thinking about, you want to be capable of, your, let's say, owning your own strategy and your own architecture.
Right.
And that's where I think the platforms of these big applications have been trying to take too much of that space. I think for smaller companies, it's not so relevant. I think they're happy having it all out of one, from coming from one vendor, best case, and having it, all in 80-90% of their processes.
Because they don't have the volume to typically justify needing to customize, or if for a smaller business, if the application that they chose gets them to 80%, we can do the last 20% manually, no big deal. But in a big organization, when you have crazy amounts of volume, that last 20% means a lot.
A question from my side then. At the moment that you do this overlay and you're trying to basically recreate some of those workflows and orchestrate some processes, you might run into two situations. One, your customer already has documented its processes somewhere, let's say a BPM platform, or they don't. How do you deal with the situation where they don't have anything yet? I mean, are you then just being basically steered by the way that the system of records is supposed to execute that process? Or how do you go about that?
So we start with like I said earlier, the user experience and the jobs to be done. So how does this process get initiated? It's typically a human does something. They either fill out a form or they send an email or something like that. We talk to them. We used to talk to them. I'll say now our implementation partners do this, but they start with what would be the fastest, easiest way for what's going to make you happy if this process, what was your interaction? We start with the user layer, because if we know that the data exists in various systems of record, maybe it's mangled and it's a lot of chaos. We know that we can actually orchestrate that and coordinate that. But let's focus on the user experience, and then we'll map that into the existing systems and the business processes. So if we need to look up data in 3 systems to kick something off over here, we can go and do that programmatically or as part of a workflow. So we really are human-centered. We think that that's the key to business process optimization, because if you start from start from the data, or here's how the process should work, or from an IT perspective, you can build this great workflow and no one's going to want to use it because it's so miserable to interact with, and they're going to keep doing it the old way. So it's like, then why even do the project? So and sometimes that's the way that we accomplish that. Back to how we're able to iterate is, let's just say it's a manual process today. We can pick employee onboarding or something like that. It's manual process today. Someone sends an email to HR. Well, the first thing that we can do is create a web form to capture some information for the HR person to fill out. And then maybe we just send the email. Maybe that's day one. Now we at least know how many times is this happening, what data do we have as inputs, et cetera. Okay, now version 2, let's add a step to do this automation. It's version 3, a step to do this automation. And you can iteratively do it. What I've seen in traditional BPM platforms is you got a grand plan for everything, because it's so hard to change once it's out there. Or you're starting from a template for, this is how the BPM vendor thinks you should do onboarding, and then you've got to unwind that and map that to your process. And then you got to bring Deloitte in, and it costs $10 million. And it's like, why don't we just let's get stuff done?
But this brings me really straight into my favorite topic, and Russell knows that as well. I mean, what you're describing is management of change, and so what I'm wondering is, you're building these workflows. I assume that you document those workflows as well somewhere, because somehow they need to be linked to the processes that happen in the background. Because ultimately, at the moment that somebody decides in IT or in HR, says that we need to make a change to the system of record, that might have an impact on your workflow that is based on top of that.
Right.
So how do your customers usually deal with that? I mean, management of change is a very difficult topic for many companies, because it requires discipline and structure. And if you add a layer on top, and for all the good reasons that I really agree with, it adds a layer of complexity and things that you need to think about when you need to make a change.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no silver bullet for this. It is discipline.
For sure not.
You can, what you can do within our platform is you can say, hey, here's a system. What integrations are we doing to the system, and where are those integrations? So you can quickly go from, I'll just say ServiceNow, and then you can say, okay, we're touching these 10 things. Okay, let's look at where are our processes touching these 10 things. So you can identify and get to them quite quickly.
All right, yeah.
In this abstraction layer. And then within those workflows, you can document inside of the platform itself, here's what this thing is doing. But some of our customers, they have, change management systems. And so, it's kind of up to the customer and how they manage change. But what we've found over time is we're typically integrating with like the center of the bell curve of whatever that system of record does. So we're not touching the fringes, and those APIs really don't change that much. And so we've actually helped customers migrate from BMC to ServiceNow, right? And it was like a couple-day project from a user experience and business process perspective. All we had to do is swap out a couple of steps.
Yeah. I mean, I ran a management of change process based on BMC Remedy back in 2014, 15. I would have killed to have an overlaying workflow orchestration form type of thing for my users to be easier to work with, because in all respect to BMC Remedy, it was not the most user-friendly system of all.
It's one of the first things. That's one of the first processes, and it's like was part of the inspiration for this whole company is change management. And like, I not only do I want to see a change or a list of changes, I want to visualize them in a calendar. So like, you made it so you can build a UI that looks at all your changes, but it then overlays in 3 other data sources that have time series data, so you can see that and how this one change is going to impact things.
Absolutely cool. Russell, you got one more question for me, and then we need to wrap it up.
Yeah, we do. And I'm glad that I'm allowed to ask the last question.
As always.
No, James, it was really, really great. What do you see coming next? So Kinetic Data in its further journey, but also in the context of the market. What are your plans now that you're CEO and you have everything under control, and you can drive and you can sail with your ship to new ventures? What's coming? What can we expect in the next couple of years to hear and see from Kinetic Data, and where you go? Where are you heading?
Well, I talked a little bit from a product perspective, making it even easier to interact with AI. That's not going anywhere within our platform. Again, it's doable today, but we can make it a little bit more first class. Also from a product perspective, just, much easier making it even easier for our customers, more low code for our customers. We're trying to shift the ability to have the people that are closest to a process fix the process or make their own process. And that's citizen development. You've heard these buzzwords go around.
Yeah.
The problem is you need governance around that, right? And so what winds up happening is in an organization, they'll have, HR will have their own low code app, and they do their own low code stuff. And eventually it bubbles up to like, hey, this needs to be an enterprise thing. So then IT gets it, and it takes them 6 months or a year to build it. What if we could make it like, I talked earlier about how each of these processes is isolated, so you can permission who can change or manage that process. So you can have a bunch of governance around the entire platform. Here's what the look and feel should be. Here's the integrations that we're allowed to do. And then you could actually allow the people closest to the problem to solve those problems. That's ultimately what we're trying to achieve, is the true citizen development, but with a whole bunch of protections behind the scenes. And so we're gonna keep shifting that way. Right now, there's a couple of things in our tool that require us say you need to know a little bit of JavaScript in order to do some parts, et cetera. So we want to be able to just shift it further left.
Super. Yeah, and I think for me as a recap, it shows that a lot of these let's say buzzwords have been implemented with little apps, and in small companies and application areas it works. But if you're thinking about on an enterprise big scale, there are different dynamics and there's different constraints that you have to take into consideration. And I think that's where you're coming from, real, kind of like working level applications in a big style. And you're embracing, say, the modern application architectural aspects and let's say bringing along a path that really works. And ultimately it's not just like little pilots here, little things working there. but you provide a platform that works across a big complex like right. organization and a big complex application infrastructure, and that's always it's a monster to manage. and you have a good approach there. So it was really good talking to you.
Likewise.
Absolutely. So I'm always having the distinct pleasure, or not pleasure actually, to wrap this up, because we would like to keep talking. So James, I would like to really thank you for coming on to the show and sharing your experiences and thoughts and knowledge with our listeners and with us as well. And to all of our listeners, I would say thank you for listening. Like and subscribe as usual, and see each other next episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.